name is I'm the Denver fellow, Colorado fellow, because I do all of Colorado too. And I'm a second year fellow. I'm currently in grad school for international human rights. I graduated with a degree in international relations in 2018, and I also work at the Capitol. So, yeah.
Thank you. Anna?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm not sure if you can see me. I have my camera on, but my name is Ana del Castillo. I use she, series pronouns, and I'm currently a graduate student at Harvard University, where I'm getting my Master of Divinity, and my focus is on religion, politics, and ethics. And I'm just sending a lot of warmth to people who are experiencing university closings due to coronavirus. Harvard just announced today that we are closing for the rest of the semester, but I'm excited to talk to you more about my experience with the fellowship, and I'm really excited that you all are here.
And Shraddha?
Hi everyone, my name is Shraddha Park. I am the Columbus, Ohio fellow, but similar to Aya, I do the whole state of Ohio. I'm a senior at The Ohio State University. I'm studying public policy and women's studies, and I'm really excited that you guys could all join.
Uh-oh. Can everybody hear everyone? I just got a message saying that somebody can only hear me. Taylor's typing. Laura can only hear me. Taylor can hear everyone, and Jocelyn can hear everyone. Laura, I don't know what's going on. Laura, if you want to log out and log back in and see if maybe that helps, try that out. Okay. All right, so we'll hand it over to our fellows, and they're going to get started on the presentation. So if you do have questions while they're going through, please feel free to drop them into the chat box, and we will answer them throughout the presentation.
Okay, so just to go over the agenda for the webinar, we just introduced all of ourselves, and then I'll go over this agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about what Ignite as an organization is, and then we're going to go into more details about what specifically the fellowship program entails. We're going to talk a little bit about a day in the life of a fellow, but spoiler alert, no day is ever the same. We're going to talk a little bit about college chapters and college councils and the differences between them. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how supervision and support goes, as well as the relationship we have with the national headquarters. And then we're going to go into the details of the application timeline and next steps for applying. And then at the end, we can answer any of the questions you guys have. Okay, so just to go into a little bit about Ignite as an organization, if you're not familiar, Ignite is a national nonprofit that's building a movement of young women across the country who are ready and eager to own their fair share of political power. So what that means is, oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I just started getting an echo. So what that means is, as an organization, we have programming from multiple different levels, all the way starting from like kindergarten. We have high school programming, college programming, and then young professionals network. So specifically with the college programming, which is what the fellowship falls under, we're going into the 5th cohort of the fellowship program, so the 5th year. And the purpose of the Ignite Fellows is to increase college programming throughout the country. So that's where all the fellowship cities, which is here. So we have 22 fellowship cities with the potential to add at least 10 more cities for the upcoming year. So these are all the cities in which a fellow would be placed to essentially expand on the college programming that's either already in those cities that have already existed or are going to be newly put into those cities. Okay, and then just to go into some of the details of what the fellowship program looks like, So it is a 1-year commitment with a compensation of $12,000 throughout the year. There's also a possibility to reapply and do a second year. So myself and Aya, one of the other fellows, are actually second-year fellows. So we've been doing this work since last year, 2018, or 2 years ago, I guess, 2018. And then we start the programming in September in the Bay Area, which is when everybody gets together to learn more about the fellowship and what that entails. Then we meet up again in person for mid-year retreats throughout the year. And then at the end of the year, the fellowship concludes with our national conference in Washington, D.C. So in general, the fellowship program contains a lot of different roles, and you'll be fulfilling a lot of different roles being a fellow. But some specific things that we do is we do run trainings, and we get to benefit from training. So specific trainings would be like media and on-camera training. We learn how to put on events and specifics about planning events. So when you're running a college council, that's pretty much putting on an event from start to finish. And you learn a lot about networking with elected officials and other community members throughout your local region. And Ignite really heavily invests in all of the fellows. So like I mentioned, that week-long training in the Bay Area at the beginning of the fellowship has, it's a jam-packed week full of training and specific workshops and things to kind of develop yourself as a leader and as a fellow. And then, I think that's it. And I will pass this off to Aya.
Before we jump to me, does anybody have any questions so far? Or are we going to do questions completely at the end?
I haven't seen any questions come through yet, so you can go. But if you want to pause throughout your time, I'll let you know if there are any questions.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome.
So a day in the life of a fellow obviously looks a lot different for everybody, especially depending on whether you're a new city or you're in a city that already has several chapters. For me, I balance my fellowship work with school and work as my other job as well. And it's nice for me because both of my jobs kind of intertwine since I work in the policy space as is. It's really interesting because it all comes together. But I currently have 6 chapters. So for me right now it's just sustainability. So what I do is pretty much stay in contact with all of my leadership teams. So all of my chapter leadership, I check in on them. We have meetings all the time to make sure that they're staying on track with events. And then obviously we plan for college councils, and we have 46 college councils a year as a requirement for a fellow, and that could change, but so we work on that kind of stuff, replying to emails, staying in contact with kitchen cabinets, and then also going to events where we can represent Ignite as an organization, represent our chapters, and anything honestly that can give us more resources to give to our chapters. But it's all very relative and could look really different or really similar depending on where you are and what you're doing with the fellowship. Building relationships is the most important thing that you're going to see as a fellow, because it comes into having your kitchen cabinets, which is people in the field who support you as an Ignite fellow, building your chapters, having good chapter leadership, having people that you can recruit as speakers at your events. So really the bulk of the fellowship is to build relationships and sustain the relationships as well. Especially when you're recruiting people for chapters or just to come to events, come to your college councils, you're going to want to really build relationships because you don't want to just throw Ignite onto them. You want to build a connection. And I found that in my last 2 years in the fellowship, building relationships and really connecting on a personal level with people is what kind of really attracted them to the organization as a whole and wanted them and made them want to commit to coming to the events, as well as committing to chapter leadership. Especially when it comes to chapter leadership, you're going to want to build a relationship so that they know that they can trust you and they feel more empowered. And I genuinely believe that having personal connections with people can help you feel way more empowered. Also, building relationships with your fellowship cohort, with your Ignite leadership is very important. You never know what you're going to find. You're going to find a huge support system, as well as just long life friends, honestly. And then going more into college chapters. So college chapters are basically an on-campus network of peers who are connected, and pretty much what I see them as are mini fellowship cohorts. So they're people who take what you train them with and take it back to a larger network of young women and allies. And they really just take what you've trained them and train other young women. And that's why it goes back to building relationships is key, because the more that you have a personal connection with somebody, the more committed they're going to be, the more they're actually going to pay attention to what you're giving them. One thing I found when I was in college, especially, is I had to navigate the political world all on my own. And even when I did find people who had the resources that I wanted, I just didn't connect with them, and they didn't necessarily make the effort to connect with me. So I didn't really respond to receiving the resources as well as I've seen within something like Ignite. So really just see it as like a mini fellowship cohort where they're learning everything that we learn from us, and then taking it back to an even larger network and just passing it on. And our biggest goal is really to identify the women, make them feel empowered so that they can become leaders in their community, they can become leaders in the chapter. They can get, when we connect them to speakers at our events like legislators, city council members, whoever it may be, they feel empowered enough to really show who they are, show what potential they have, and that they're 100% capable in doing whatever they put their mind to, and just giving them whatever support they need. Obviously, once you establish a chapter, once you establish chapter leadership, you don't want to just hand off, just give them everything that they need whenever they want it. You want to make them feel empowered enough to do it on their own, knowing that they have you as a support system right by their side, knowing that you're not going to let them just, go into the deep end alone, but just empowering them enough to know that they can do the work on their own and that they don't need anybody to do it. And then the activities are my favorite part. So you can do things like panels, discussions, have voter registration drives, which is also really cool because oftentimes what I've seen in the young, like the youth, a lot of people don't vote because they don't know how to vote. And so when you have young people talking to young people about why it's important to vote, it just resonates more. And the person who probably wouldn't vote if they were talking to somebody older, like in canvassing or something, is going to be way more receptive to it because it's coming from somebody who they can really resonate with, and they're going to be more comfortable in asking questions. That's at least what I've seen in my community. It could, range from community to community. That was definitely my favorite part. Also, some of my chapters hold like political book clubs, so they'll read books that are relevant to our current political climate and just kind of like have discussions on them. So really, it could be anything. And once a chapter leadership is comfortable enough, they can get really creative. But it's cool to also give them, examples and stuff. But those are some of the things that we do. Sorry, I know I'm going kind of fast. If you have any questions, just go ahead and I'll answer them. But now going to college councils. So like I mentioned earlier, fellows are required to host 4 to 6 college councils a year, and these are usually on things that have to do with what's going on. So for example, last year, my first college council was right before the primaries, so the state primaries, and I held a college council on intro to what Ignite is, so I can introduce it more to the community. And then also we had, I can't remember the name of the organization, but it's like a voting organization that pushes out more information on why you should vote and how you should vote. And so we had them present at the college council, and it gave the attendees so much information. They literally finished up and they were like, wow, I didn't even know we had this much power in the community. I didn't know that we had like mail out ballots, because a lot of people hadn't even registered to vote. I didn't know that you can actually register people to vote if you take this 1-day training. Like, it just supplied them with so much knowledge and information. And then this year, our biggest focus was the census. So I held a college council in February on the 2020 census. And then, so it can range on to anything from elections to census to policy. We also did Ignite the Capital. I don't know if any of you guys have attended any of those in any of your cities, but that pretty much enables Ignite members to come for a day at the Capitol and then testify, talk to legislators, connect with their legislators, go into meetings with legislators and talk about their support for a certain bill. And before that, I find it useful to do a college council on just legislative advocacy, because unfortunately we go into these spaces thinking that everybody knows the basics of legislative advocacy. And unfortunately, a lot of people actually don't know. They don't know how a bill becomes a law. They don't know what the legislature is. So I work for the chair of judiciary in the House in the Colorado General Assembly, and a lot of times when I explain what I'm doing to people, or like what my position is, people our age are like, oh, I don't know what that is, which is really sad, because you have people voting, but then after they vote, they don't know what else to do. They don't know that they can advocate for policy. They don't know that they can get policy drafted themselves. They don't know that the Capitol really is their home, and they can go and testify on anything, or visit their members, or call their members, or email their legislative members. So I find that that's one of the most useful college councils that you can have, especially at the beginnings. And while you're talking about, the legislative processes and politics, that's, the base of everything. And if people don't have that knowledge, which a lot of people don't, and I wouldn't assume that just because somebody's interested in politics that they know that kind of stuff. Because that also goes hand in hand with people thinking that you have to be a political science major to be in politics, which is absolutely not true. So that was my favorite college council. And it goes back again to relationship building, because that's how you get your speakers for your events. So at every event now I have a legislator, and it's easier for me to connect with them because I show up to events, I talk to them regularly, and it's really nice for the attendees because they really connect with them. So I've had a lot of legislators come to the events, and then after they'll stay and all the attendees will like talk to them. I've had 3 attendees that have gained internships with legislators that have spoken at our college councils. And so the relationship building is like a domino effect. It moves on beyond you. So that's something really important to remember. And then we get provided with toolkits for student development that go hand in hand with college councils. And it's kind of nice because you can mold it to your own state, but it really just gives you a guideline on what to do, so you're not just thrown into the deep end alone. But it does give you the creativity to kind of do what you feel your community needs. I see a question. Can we have college council to focus on specific issues? So yes and no. So you have to be careful with specific issues, just because we are nonpartisan. So you don't want to be leaning more partisan on something. But at the same time, for example, when we do something like Ignite the Capitol, you do focus on policy, but it's kind of important so every community is different. My community, for example, is more liberal. Denver is more liberal. Shraddha, for example, has a mix, but she also has a lot of right-leaning, so you really have to mold it to what your community wants. So what I do when I'm talking about policy or specific issues, I kind of do a poll and talk to the group that usually you have a regular standing group of people who attend these college councils, so you'll kind of get a feel of what they're expecting from you. And then you can ask them, like, hey, have you guys looked at the General Assembly website, for example? Have you seen what's being presented this session? What issues are you guys passionate about? What do you feel like you want to advocate for? But obviously we do have our main policy priorities, which is census, women's rights, civic education, and the last one slipped my mind. If anybody wants to jump in real quick and give me the last one. If anybody remembers, no. Okay, well,
Did you
anyways,
say
those
civic?
are,
Sorry, I think I put myself on mute. Did you say civic education?
yeah, I did. So it's civic
Oh,
education, women's rights, census, or is that it?
Voting rights.
Voting
voting
rights.
rights.
Yeah.
Right. So really you want to focus on those things, and then a lot of things can stem out from that. The advice that I would give is just feeling out your community first and seeing what your community feels like they need from you. But other than that, really, yes, you just have to be careful about the nonpartisanship. So you don't want to be leaning too heavily on either side of the party, or even if you do focus on an issue, you just don't want to kind of show any party affiliation with it, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question? Okay, perfect, yeah. And then I think, is that it for me? Yeah, now moving on to Anna.
So as you all just heard, Aya covered a lot of the work that we do, and there are a lot of different projects connected to your role as an Ignite Fellow. And one of the really great things about Ignite is that you're given so much supervision and support. So this is my first year in the fellowship. Aya and Shraddha are both year 2 fellows. So that's a part of your support system. You'll have a year 2 fellow who's assigned to you, who will kind of like be there to help explain the work. Like they're there if you need to text them a question, if it's like an hour before your first college council and like you forgot something, they're there for you. We also have like a really great WhatsApp channel where you can text questions to all the fellows across the country, and they respond so fast. So like sometimes I forget our passwords to log in to like make posters on Canva, and there's always someone there who's able to be like, oh, like here's a password. So that's kind of the peer support that you get. If you look in that picture on the bottom, which is so fly, this includes a lot of our fellows, and it's really beautiful to see the sisterhood that this has kind of created. And I know that if I need to call on a year 2 fellow to kind of fill in the gaps, or if I need to like talk to someone because I feel stressed, they're always there, which is a really special part of this fellowship. In terms of supervision, you will also be assigned a supervisor. So this person is someone that works full-time for Ignite, and you have a meeting once a week with them via Zoom. So my supervisor is Tiara. She's absolutely incredible. And once a week, we have a 1-hour conversation in which she goes over like a weekly plan with me, and we set priorities. We talk about things that I should be focusing on for the month. And so it's really nice knowing that once a week for 1 hour, I just have time with Tiara to like talk about the responsibilities that I have, to ask her any questions. And more than that, you're connected to the broader Ignite national team. So we have a policy director, we have a director of communications, we have regional directors. Michelle, who's on this call right now, as she mentioned, is a regional director. So the team is really there to supervise you if you need it. So that I know that like when you hear about a lot of the work that we do, like the college councils, advocacy work, it seems like a lot, and it is, but you have such a huge support system behind you that it definitely makes the work possible. And I can speak from personal experience. So I'm a graduate student, and sometimes like around finals, like finals last semester, I was a bit overwhelmed. And that was a great moment when my supervisor was like, hey, if you kind of like need to take the week off to like focus on your schoolwork, like let me know how I can support you. And like, that's a possibility. So the supervision and support is really phenomenal. And if you have questions about that, I'm happy to answer them. Yes, so the relationships with national headquarters. There's this really cool thing. When you get the fellowship, you get to spend a week in California, kind of getting to know all the details about the fellowship, the work that we do. You'll sit through a lot of trainings. And so that for me was really helpful. 7 pretty intense days where you're really just inundated with information and you can kind of marinate in all of it, which is great. And you also have a mid-year retreat. So during our mid-year retreat, it's spread out regionally, even though I'm based in Boston, I'm the Boston Fellow, but I went to the Southern retreat because it worked better with my schedule. And that was a time for us to kind of check in again on the values of Ignite, to talk about our priorities, to create a strategic plan for the rest of the year. So that retreat is also really great. The support goes both ways. Fellows work with national headquarters on the following: fundraisers, media pieces, and social media. So from time to time, there might be a fundraiser in your city or maybe in your region, and someone from the national team will contact you and ask you to speak at that fundraiser. So for me, I've spoken at a couple of them, and it really just depends on like your schedule, if you're available, but those are really good opportunities to meet some of our donors and some of our board members. On media pieces, someone might reach out to you and say, like, you know, in your region, there is like this issue connected to voting rights. Could we ask you to be interviewed with like this publication? So shout out to Shraddha. She was actually featured in the New York Times this year in a really cool piece on Ignite, but that's just one example of how nationals might reach out to you and ask you to contribute or to be interviewed by NPR. I know our Atlanta fellow, Lauren, was recently interviewed with Ann Moses, who's our founder. So different things like that. Nationals will connect you to those opportunities. And then for social media, if you don't already follow us on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, you should definitely do that. But sometimes you will be reached out to do like an Instagram takeover, or maybe to share photos of a day of advocacy on Facebook, different things like that. So that's also a really fun part of the job, is to do your little Instagram takeovers. But yes, the team is always there to support you, and really great at responding to emails, especially kind of when you're like, I'm in my first year and I know that I've had so many questions, and the national team has always been there to answer them. All right, and so now the timeline. These are the different dates that we're working with. So you can find the city that you're a part of, see when the deadline is. I would definitely say that if you're pretty set on applying to the fellowship, you should just go ahead and put your application in now, because that way the team will have a chance to look at it, to reach out to you, to schedule an interview. So really encourage you to just go for it. This is such an incredible experience, and I'm sure that you are qualified. So definitely get your application in by that deadline, but I'd say the sooner you get it in, the better. And if people have questions on that, feel free to ask too. But the earliest one is April 6th, and that includes my city of Boston. And then it looks like July is the latest deadline.
One thing, if I could just hop in real quick, that I want to plug, if you don't see your city on this list, you can go to our website, that's ignitenational.org. And if you look under programs and click on fellowship, there's a link in there that you can submit if you want to get application updates. We anticipate announcing more cities here in the next couple of months. And so it is totally possible that your city will have a fellow added. So I definitely encourage you to sign up for application updates if you don't see your city on this list.
Thank you for that, Michelle. Yeah, and so now we will move into a question and answer period. Feel free. Oh, I see a question now. Would it be possible we might be paired with a city we don't directly choose? So I'm going to say no. If you would be applying to a specific city, like the city that you live in, so all of these fellowships are based on you living in that area. I'm wondering if you see like if like maybe you live in California where there's multiple locations, or is there like a specific, are you applying to multiple fellowships, I guess? I see that you're typing. Also, if others have questions, you can just go ahead and type them in and I'll take them as they come. Thank you. I was wondering with the addition of new cities, if people would be added to different cities.
That's a good question. If a new city is announced, you would basically, you want to apply for any city where you're interested in being the fellow. As Anna mentioned, you do need to live in that city because you're doing so much face-to-face work with people on a daily basis. But if you have the flexibility to move to a different city and you're interested in moving to that city and have, you know, your support network and things like that, that's totally doable. But if you see a city that it gets announced and you want to be a candidate for that city, you would want to apply directly to that city.
Yeah.
Sure thing.
Any other questions? I'm also going to pull up the FAQs.
We've got a couple people typing questions too. So the question about when will you be notified if you're selected, because we have rolling application deadlines, it just really depends on when the deadline is and then what the candidate pool looks like. You would know no later than July, and ideally you would know ahead of that, depending on what the deadline is. And then Destiny asked, is it possible to work the presidential campaign and participate in the fellowship? If you have the capacity to do both, yes. If you're going to be in that one specific city working on that campaign. One of the FAQs on this document or on this slide is how many hours per week do fellows typically work? And fellows typically work about 15 hours per week. So if you were a full-time student and you were doing 15 hours a week for your fellowship, I would say like it's up to you and what you think your capacity is to take on additional work.
I'll start answering some of these FAQs too while people still think of questions, but the how many hours per week do fellows put into their work? It is 15 hours minimum per week. But I will say, and I'm sure Shraddha and Aya can attest to this, on weeks where you have a big event like Ignite the Capitol, you might be putting in more than 15 hours. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I would say they really do try to respect the 15 hours per week, knowing that we are full-time students or people might also have full-time jobs. The next question is, are most of the campuses you work with close by? How much travel is involved when working with chapters? I would say that really varies fellowship by fellowship. So I can say for Boston, most of my campuses are within like a 5-mile radius. So I can easily get to them by public transportation. Your girl doesn't have a car, but one of my campuses is Framingham State, which is actually pretty far away. So unfortunately, I'm only able to visit that campus like once a semester, which is fine because mostly for my college council events, they will come to Boston for that. But it depends. I know that some fellows have cars and drive out to their schools, but that's not an expectation that if you do have a school that's really far away that you constantly need to be driving there. That's definitely not needed. Let's see. How did you build relationships with campuses and student leaders? Also, if anyone else wants to chime in, you totally can. But for building relationships, Tiara, who's my supervisor, has like a really great rule of talking to people in person. So I reached out to some young leaders in the community who I just like saw that they were doing cool civic engagement work either through Facebook or like different groups. And I reached out to them for coffee and told them about the work that I did. So I think doing one-on-one coffee dates is really effective. And asking people in your circles, like putting it on Facebook, saying like, do you know young women who are doing civic engagement work, or like young women who are interested in community organizing for social change? And then compiling a list of those folks and then trying to get in contact with them. But we really believe that building relationships in person or even over the phone or like web chatting is more personal than necessarily like emailing someone. So if that's your first point of contact, that's great. But we always encourage people to like reach out for coffee or lunch.
And I'll add to that actually. One thing about relationships, so when you're trying to build chapters or recruit people to come to your events or become leaders, chapter leaders, I will tell you, as a student, a lot of us know, like when I was an undergrad, I definitely ignored a lot of things because I was like, oh, I'm too busy. So unless they have somebody physical to really connect with, and they're like, oh, I can see a friendship here, and it's not all just through email and seeming transactional, they're not gonna want to commit. That was my experience. So like, I definitely agree with Anna and Tiara's practice. Tiara is also my supervisor. If you can meet with them, do that. Also for campuses that are really far away. So I have three college councils that are an hour to 3 hours away. So when we can't meet, because a lot of them don't have cars or they're too busy to come out, instead of just doing it over the phone, I always do like a Google Hangout so that it feels more real and we can see each other. So I think anybody in the fellowship will definitely stress that to you. As an incoming fellow, you definitely want to remember really strong relationship building skills, because a lot of times people aren't going to reply to emails, even text. Sometimes people don't do it. So building like a real physical relationship is important. So they really get to know you and know who you are and know that, oh, okay, this person really like supports me and trusts me, and like I feel like I have a friend now, so I can come to these events. That works the best.
There's a question that came in from Laura. She's graduating in June and wants to know if she can still be selected to be a fellow, or does she have to be a current student? Do one of y'all want to answer, or do you want me to?
Oh, I can answer. I actually became a fellow right after I graduated undergrad too. So they like to have people who had just graduated too, especially if you know the campuses and stuff. You should be fine because you're a recent graduate.
Yeah. It is not a prerequisite to be in school, but definitely important to be able to build relationships on university campuses where you'll spend the bulk of your time.
Also, going back to the presidential campaign question. So when I first came into the fellowship, I was working not on a presidential campaign, but I was working on a re-election campaign for the legislator I work for. And that was fine, but now I'm also in grad school and I work full-time at the legislature. So I work around 55 to 60 hours a week and I go to school. So I will tell you, it's doable as long as you get the work done. You just have to figure out if it's right for you so you don't burn yourself out. Just wanted to throw that out there.
And if our campus does not have an Ignite chapter, are we still able to serve as a fellow? Yes, 100%. So I am at Harvard, and Harvard actually didn't have an Ignite chapter when I started. And then by the nature of the work, we have a Harvard chapter that's starting now. But you can totally do that even if your campus doesn't even have an Ignite chapter. That's a good question. So the last FAQ, but feel free to keep asking us questions, is what have you learned from being a fellow? And Oh my gosh, I've learned so much. This really has been such a life-giving experience for me as someone who has always been kind of politically active and involved in civic engagement work. But in this role, you will really learn your own like leadership style. So for me, I didn't realize how difficult it can be to do that relationship building work with people outside of my immediate circles. So, you know, doing outreach on campuses that I've never like spent time on before has taught me the importance of authentic relationship building. And I think that looks deeper than just like emailing someone because you want them to show up at your event, but it means like, how do I show someone that I'm truly invested in their future? And that has been really helpful for my leadership development. But someone else, feel free to chime in.
So for me, it taught me a lot of things too, like relationship building, which is why I keep coming back to that. So like before I became an Ignite Fellow, I was like, I would look at events and stuff and want to go, but I would never go if I didn't have somebody else with me. And I think becoming a fellow has taught me how to advocate for myself as a woman in this field and as a woman of color specifically. It's made me become way more confident. So now I will happily go to an event by myself. I don't need somebody with me. But also just learning how to navigate the field, learning how to make connections with everybody, how to give yourself a seat at the table. It honestly teaches you so much, along with connecting you to so many people. So like all the fellows I can see being my lifelong friends now. We all resonate on different levels. So I will say you just learned so much, good and bad. It's not always butterflies and rainbows, but you learn a lot and you learn how to get through the hard because this field isn't easy. And I think anybody who tries to sugarcoat that isn't in it deep enough. So I think that's one of the most important lessons taught is it's not easy whatsoever, but it teaches you the confidence to have the confidence that you need to kind of navigate it.
There were a couple of questions that came in. I can read them and then y'all can answer them. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you speak a little bit more to the time management aspect, particularly in scheduling? Do you have set hours and some flex hours for meetings? How much variation is there in the schedule overall?
I can answer that. So that is, yeah, so pretty much like with the set hours thing, we don't really have like a certain, you have to be working from this time to this time, aside from meetings that you'll schedule based on your own, availability. A lot of this work is kind of on your own time. So again, if you have an event scheduled or a meeting scheduled, again, that would be to your best availability, but everything else, like, to be quite honest, I do work at like all hours of the day and even all hours of the night, just depending on when I'm most comfortable and have that availability. And then, how much variation is there in the schedule? I would say, I think like Aya was talking about kind of a day in the life, there's just not really, like even week to week, day to day, there's so much variation. If there's a lot of prep work that you need to do that week, then maybe I have a lot of like late night like work sessions. If there's a lot more like meetings that are going on during a certain week, then I have a lot more like midday, afternoon type of things. So it really truly is, I don't know if this answers the question, but there's really no set hours or set schedule at all.
And then the next question is, do you advise waiting to see if your city is added or applying to a place you're interested in moving to? Would y'all like me to answer that?
I could take that one. Or
okay.
Yeah, how about you fill in if I miss it. But
yes.
Yeah, I think that actually, Michelle, you take this because you probably know better than I do.
I mean, I think it's really up to you. If doing the fellowship is something that you are really excited about and really want to do, I would say apply to a city where you feel like you have a very strong likelihood of being able to move to. Typically, because of the people that we attract to the fellowship, they're typically in college or like pretty new out of college, and so that moving to another city isn't always feasible. So we don't see that a ton. But if there is a city where you are like, yeah, I would totally move there, and I want to apply for this fellowship, I would say yes, do that. If you really don't have flexibility to move to another city, then don't apply for it. Just sign up for the reminders or the email alerts letting you know about when we add new cities. And then if you're in a city where we don't currently have programming, please reach out to a program staff member so that we can talk to you about how you can get involved with Ignite in your city. We can try to connect you to other college chapters that are happening in your city, or just connect you to advocates that we have in that city. And let me know if you have any additional questions. And then another question that came in was, how does traveling work? In the event that we need to visit campuses that are farther, are we expected to cover the cost?
I can answer that. So myself and Aya as well, we travel pretty far to campuses. So for traveling, we both have cars just because in our cities and states that's a lot more feasible. But all the gas mileage does get reimbursed. So we don't take any of that like cost personally. And then yeah, I think that was just about covering costs. So yeah, none of that cost comes out of our pocket.
Yeah, we have a mileage reimbursement form that you can submit. You would want to get your like mileage approved before you make a big trip so that your manager is aware of that and can approve your travel to the campus. But yes, you would do a mileage reimbursement. And then another question came in about how many campuses would a typical fellow work with? Isn't it? I can answer if nobody else wants to. I'm going to take that as yes. It really depends on the city that you're in. And I know we keep saying that, but we have some cities that we are hiring fellows for where we've never done a fellowship before. And we have some cities where we've been in that city for 5 years and programs are really established. So, in Atlanta, I have a fellow there. She has 4 college chapters that she's working with. But in like one of our newer cities that we started this year, they started with 0 chapters and have started 2 new chapters during this semester. So it really varies on the city and how established we are already in that city. I would say maybe Aya, in Colorado, since you're working with programs across Colorado, about how many college chapters do you work with?
So I have 6 college chapters.
Yeah, so it does vary. I think 6 is probably on the higher end for the number of college chapters that someone might work with. But if you're in a brand new city where we've never had programming, you would spend probably, honestly, like the first semester building relationships, reaching out to people, recruiting people to talk to, and getting them to college councils, and then starting those college chapters. And so I would say in your first year, you would want to try to start 2 to 3 college chapters, but it really varies.
And it definitely does take time. In some areas, it's really easy. So, like, one of my chapters, I built a relationship right away last year, my first month of being a fellow, and by the end of the month, we had a chapter. And then other chapters, it took me a year and a half to build. So, it depends on the campus. It depends on who you know. So don't be too hard on yourself if you become a fellow and you're having trouble building a chapter, because it does take time. You have to be patient, especially if you want effective leadership, because you don't want to just throw anybody on the leadership just to have a chapter. You want sustainability as well. So just keep that in mind.
That's really good advice. And context. It does take time. Are there any other questions? Oh, I see typing happening. Oh, awesome. Okay, it looks like then that there aren't any more questions. So I just want to sincerely thank all of you for joining us this evening, for having really incredible questions that you're asking, and for your interest in the Ignite Fellowship. I also want to thank Aya, Anna, and Shraddha for jumping in and doing the webinar tonight. It's always incredible for people to hear directly from our fellows. So thank y'all so much. If you have any questions after the webinar that you think of, you are more than welcome to email me. My email address is Michelle, Michelle, at ignitenational.org, and I will follow up with you. And then we would love for you to follow us on social media. And then our website is ignitenational.org. And I definitely encourage you to check out the website, especially the fellowship page on our website. It'll give you a lot of key information. And then, will the slide deck be sent out? That is a great question. I don't know, and I can follow up with you. Let me just put that question down. Will slide deck be sent? I'll follow up with you. And then my email address again is Michelle, Michelle, at ignitenational.org. I think I can type it into the chat box and y'all can see it also. So feel free to email me if you do have questions after leaving the webinar. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank y'all so much. Really appreciate having you.
Look forward to your applications. Have a great evening.
Bye.